A so-called ban at a college in India on traditional Muslim headscarves known as a hijab has sparked outrage. Student and rights groups accusing the college administration of bias against the Muslim minority. The college head, Mabrur Ahmed, told the media they cannot allow the students to wear hijab in classrooms as it is not part of the uniform, and that the administration is abiding by Education Ministry directives. The local Lawyers Association has written to the state government demanding an investigation against the college administration and teachers for harassing the students. The Campus Front of India, an organization of Muslim students active in southern Indian states, has urged the college to rescind its rules over the hijab and allow the students to wear it while attending classes. To get a sense of why this is happening, we're joined now by Mabrur Ahmed. He speaks to us from London. He's the founder and director of Restless Beings in the UK. It's a human rights group. A very good evening to you, Mabrur, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So we've heard of incidents like this around the world. Tell us why we're seeing this at this particular college.
I mean, particular college, I'm afraid I won't be able to answer that question, this particular college. Well, I can answer why particularly India and why particularly Karnataka, which is the region, the state in which this has happened. I'm sure yourself and your viewers are well aware that the BJP is a party in India, a right-wing party, are in power. They've been in power and the incumbent power for some time now. And there are some local elections coming up. To be honest with you, the ticket by which the BJP gained power in India was on something known as communalism. So that is basically, pitting communities against communities. The whole mantra of the BJP is something known as Hindutva, which is to establish a Hindu nation. Now, why this is particularly relevant and pertinent in the case of India is because, of course, India was born with the ideal of secularism. It's probably the largest state in the world in terms of a geographical size and also population, which claims to be a secular country. And it has a constitution which welcomes an openness and an acceptance of all religions and of all peoples. To be honest with you, history has taught us since their independence that that's not been the case. And especially now, we can see it more and more clearly that that's not the case now, and it's not the intention of those in power and looking to power.
And I'd like to jump onto that particular bandwagon. As you say, it is the acceptance of all, irrespective of religion and creed. And I'd like to use South Africa as an example, and I'll use myself as an example. The fact that you go to a multiracial school that says it provides quality education to all, but anything that speaks to your blackness, and a lot of young students here in South Africa relate to that. It's being highlighted. And I'm wondering why in this day and age, when we're saying we acknowledge the constitutional rights of people to self-determination, to freedom of expression when it comes to religion, and etc. So I asked about this particular school, whether there was any history of it, but as you said, it's part of a larger context. So how has it been dealt with in the past, bar the current political situation which you just highlighted?
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant reference point, and it's actually very, very relevant. South Africa and other countries with its type of history is very relevant. First of all, so far as India is concerned, and this school, let's talk about this school specifically. It's a government school, it's a government college. So that means that by its nature, it must adhere to the constitutional, if you like, aspects of governance of the school. It's not a private school. It's not a religious college. It's not anything which kind of segregates communities. It's a government college, and as you know, across Africa, across Asia, across the whole world, government schools are supposed to be open to all. So that's the first thing. The second part of your question, or if you like, the last part of your question, is what's happened in these sorts of instances before. Well, communalism isn't something that's not troubled India. Communalism has long been the case, and I think a lot of this has got to come back down to looking at how India itself was established. Of course, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, all kind of made up the British Raj. From the colonial times, it was part of the British Empire, and one of the the most significant factor in India's borders, if you like, was the establishment of a Muslim part of India, Pakistan, and a Hindu part of India, India. That's now regarded as India. But the founders of India, if you like, or the initial governors of India, from Mahatma Gandhi to Nehru, all unified under this umbrella of secularism. And actually, what a beautiful ideal that could be, that India, with its many different languages, with its many different ethnicities, its own issues with the caste system, for example, of course, with the religions, the three major religions that exist there are Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. But of course, you still have Jainism, and you also have Sikhism, and you also have Buddhism. So such an absolute cacophony of religions, an absolute cacophony of languages, and an absolute cacophony of ethnicities. And this ideal that secularism could exist in a place like India was something that people around the world would aspire to. The reality of it has been that that's obviously when the country has been divided along the fault line of religion, for example, and when you have a populist regime and a government which drives its popularity on the back of the Hindu majoritarian polity that it tries to apply everywhere, what's going to happen by nature is that there's going to be a community or communities who are sidelined. And South Africa, again, is another wonderful example. On the backdrop of colonialism, we saw that the large power was held by the whites, even though the population majority was of black people, of people of black origin in South Africa. And South Africa faced its own troubles with apartheid for decade after decade after decade, and it was a long struggle for that freedom. What we're seeing in India now, as Genocide Watch has said, is the world's second most likeliest country to commit its own people to a genocide. And just before the turn of the year, just before Christmas, there was a large gathering held where members of the BJP-led movement, the RSS, called for people to stand up and be ready to eliminate Muslims. That kind of language and the kind of physical embodiments that were seen at the end of that meeting, alongside these things like banning hijab for innocent, kind of education, students trying to gain education, are all hallmarks of a growing tide of intolerance, a growing tide of vitriol towards the Muslims, and not just the Muslims, to other minorities that do not fit the ideal of Hindu majoritarian population that the BJP wants to create its nation upon.
I want to raise another issue that's come up often in sociological and political debates across the world around this issue. You spoke earlier on about the intersection of secularism, of law, religious, multiculturalism. It also has found within that web link to gender politics, where it's being said that Muslim women or girls have been socialized by patriarchy to wear these headscarves, that ideally, if you really look at gender equality, they wouldn't really want to. Is this something that's also finding resonance or being echoed in some of the debates that are going on there in this so-called anti-Muslim sentiment, as you said?
Yeah, I think, a lot of this speaks to this kind of chauvinism, this paternal chauvinism that the BJP And to be honest with you, the central government of India for decades has shown towards its minorities, and the minorities including mixed genders, different people from different backgrounds. So the chauvinism that I'm referring to isn't just the regular male chauvinism, but it's this idea that, we know better, we in power know better, and you who are uncouth don't know enough. And that is absolutely the same sort of attitude that the British had towards Indians, and not just Indians, but also its subjects across its empire. This idea that we know better. So far as the Muslims are concerned in India, the notion that the BJP and those in power are suggesting that there's some sort of patriarchy, which is forcing young women to make a decision and a choice to wear the hijab, is not only very, very paternal, it's very patronizing as well. I'm not going to sit here and deny that there isn't patriarchy amongst South Asian communities, as there is patriarchy across many, many communities all around the world. But that's not the only driver for a woman to decide to make a choice to wear a hijab or not to wear a hijab, to wear, modest clothing so far as Muslims are instructed, or not to wear modest clothing. That's an absolute decision that's made absolutely by the person who makes that decision. Of course, there are many, many instances of forced kind of clothing, and those situations and those circumstances should be called out correctly. But you can't tar an entire community of people, supposed practicing Muslim women who decide to wear the hijab or niqab or jilbab or whatever the terminology might be, and say that they are, uneducated and they are forced, and so therefore, their decisions are, invalidated, and we know better. That's absolutely the wrong way to look at any part of society. Just a further point on there, India is also, very, very renowned, if you like, almost for its negative policies towards transgender people, and not just transgender people, but also people who are recognized as low caste, if you like, or the Dalits and the Adivasis, the indigenous communities amongst India. That again is the hallmarks of many other genocides that we've seen in the most worst instances, apartheids, as you know, from South Africa, and at the very least, biased and bigotry led policies towards communities who are as much a part of a greater nation as those in the majoritarian.
And as you say, that bigotry is as a result of the cultural, political influences of those who seek to undermine the minorities. But when looking at the bigger discussion and going forward, when, depending on which side of the argument you'd be, somebody would say in a progressive or civilized society like this, these kind of discussions don't find favor. Weaponizing the actual issue, problematizing it, how do we get out of this?
Well, I think first things first, I absolutely understand that perspective. And I think, we have to be careful not to sensationalize every single issue that comes up. If you look at it in an isolated incident, 6 children or 6 young women who have been excluded from classes because of their decision to wear the hijab probably doesn't exactly spark a national furor. But put it into context. If you look at the state of Assam, which is in the northeastern part of India, a whole NRC, a National Register of Citizenship, has taken place, which seeks to weaponize Muslim citizenship, which seeks to segregate those communities away from mainstream India, so much so that there is, at this moment in time, many millions who have been declassified as citizens. That's done by the central government. Also done by the central government in recent memory, 1984, an entire genocide committed against Sikh communities from not just in Punjab, but also in the capital city, New Delhi. So this is a country in its recent past, in its immediate form book, that has shown all the hallmarks of weaponizing their own communities. So any instance that can be suggested that issues are weaponized or politicized or used in a hyperbolic way to further a cause is absolutely not the case. We just have to look at the facts, and don't take my words for it. Again, I will reference back to Genocide Watch, which is an entirely credible organization full of academic scholars who have been renowned the world over, who have said that India is the second most likely place in the world to constitute and institute a genocide against its own people. That is absolutely alarming for the world's largest democracy, more than 1 billion people who operate within a democratic state. It's not a dictatorship, it's not military-led, it's a democratic state.
Okay.
What happens when you have populism and right-wing kind of fanaticism driving an agenda which seeks to nullify and declassify anyone who does not follow the mantra of Hindi speaking for a Hindu religion, for a greater Hindustan? I mean, it's alarming, it's shocking what we're talking about, the number of people that could be at risk here.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us.